No mai, haere mai. Welcome to the Maxim Institute podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm the Communications Manager at Maxim Institute. This is our weekly short-form podcast. These podcasts are released in tandem with our weekly column and are a chance for you to hear in depth from the column's author about some of the thinking that went into producing their final piece. Today we talk to researcher Dr Stephanie Worboys about her recent column. Stephanie, welcome along to the podcast. Great to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
Now, we are talking about your recent column and your first column for Maxim, Why Trust is a Must. And it is based on your recent paper released just last week on the biggest subject of trust. And it's a big deal in New Zealand at the moment. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk around trust. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Sure. Trust is an attitude that enables us to take the risk of cooperating with others. When we trust, we willingly rely on another person to act in our best interest with the belief that they're not going to take advantage of us. We think they're going to do what we've trusted them to do.
So an example of that would be like a trade me trade,
yeah.
Right? That you enter into a buy and exchange with someone you've never met and you trust that they're going to turn up and pay you the money and they trust that you've actually got the goods and you're going to deliver.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a good example. The health and stability of any democracy really relies on a basic level of trust and engagement by the everyday citizen.
But we seem to be in a bit of a trust free fall at the moment.
Yeah, the data isn't good, to say it mildly. The Acumen Edelman Trust Barometer reported that trust in political leaders had fallen 10 percentage points over the last 2 years. So that's from 50% down to 40%. Wow. And trust in government had fallen by 9%, so down from 57% to 48%.
So this is a worldwide survey. Right?
So no, this one is just New Zealand.
Okay,
so the Acumen Edelman is just a gauge of trust in New Zealand, and then there's also the Acumen Barometer, which looks at democracies across the world.
And even in that, though, we're not doing so well.
No, so our total political trust score has fallen. Last year, it fell to the global average, which it had been comfortably above the average for many years.
We used to take we used to be quite proud of that. Oh, globally, we're really trustworthy and we have low corruption and stuff like that. But
low corruption is something to be proud of.
Yeah, but we can't really lay claim to the trust thing anymore, can we?
No. So this year, the Acumen Edelman Trust Barometer puts New Zealand below the global average. So we've fallen again. So we're at 48 and the global average is 51.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of distrust in politicians and in government and things like that. But you do make the point in your column that some distrust is always present in a democracy. Some distrust is healthy. I guess we don't want to just blindly trust and follow our leaders without critically engaging and thinking about what they tell us. But we also don't want to just be cynical and doubt every single word that comes out of their mouth, do we?
Yeah, that's correct. Blind submission to authority is bad in a democracy.
Yeah.
We'll just say it that way.
Guess then it's not a democracy anymore,
no,
is it?
it's something else. I think a democracy functions best when there's a healthy suspicion of the people who are in power. They're just people, and power does corrupt. And so a healthy democracy is monitoring those who hold power to make sure that they're using it well and in the interests of the people. But distrust can become a problem when it spreads to our institutions. So
there's two kind of areas, I guess, of trust. One is trust in the politicians who inhabit the institutions of parliament and the law courts and things like that. And then there's trust in parliament itself and the courts and like the media.
That's right.
And that those things are got checks and balances on the people in them.
Yeah. So when we trust an institution, we trust it based on whether it's functioning as it's supposed to be and whether it effectively can check the untrustworthy conduct of the people who are inhabiting those institutional roles.
Okay. And unfortunately, we're not trusting the checks and balances at the moment.
Yeah. So at the moment, the figure that really concerns me is that we have lost trust in government itself. Trust in the people comes and goes, and that's okay. A democracy can sustain that if we still believe that we can get rid of those politicians in the next election, or if we have some influence on the laws that they're trying to put in place, if we don't happen to like them, or if we don't think that they reflect the will of the people.
So an example of that might be a select committee hearing as a bill goes through its 3 stages in Parliament.
That's right. So after the first reading, it usually goes to a select committee, and that is the opportunity for everyday citizens to make a submission, and they can really have some input into the legislation itself. After that, it's really only through engaging with their MP that they can influence the content of the legislation. So when we get rid of that, citizens lose that opportunity to have their say.
So there's a couple of things that are a bit concerning coming out of that. One is the use of urgency in Parliament, which kind of strips away the select committee process and that public feedback process. But also, you mentioned a parliamentary survey that came out last year that showed that our engagement with Parliament and the political process is at an all-time low. That's a bit of a concerning figure, isn't it?
It is, because a democracy runs on participation, and participation runs on trust.
Yeah.
So if we lose trust, we lose participation. And again, as you made the point before, if we don't have participation, we don't have a democracy.
Yeah, so we're kind of caught in this two kind of pincer movement in that we have a lot of urgency being used, which strips out participation. And then we have people, I guess, cynically disengaging because they feel that they're not being listened to anyway.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you see it?
That is how I see it, and that is what the data shows. So the parliamentary survey that was conducted by the Office of the Clerk reports that the score of Parliament, its reputation score, has declined from 61.2 in 2020 down to 53.4 in 2022. Wow. And the survey also found that engagement had hit that new low of 13%. And to me, more worryingly, only 60% of New Zealanders thought that democratic processes are accessible to them, and only 36% believed that Parliament was focused on dealing with issues that they thought were important.
Now that's a pretty scary statistic, that only roughly a third of people think that the stuff that Parliament deals with is actually relevant to everyday. So not even relevant just to me, but to everyday New Zealanders.
Yeah.
So that's...
And if you think you don't have a say, then why bother participating?
Yeah, and if you're not going to participate, you don't trust, declines, and democracy goes out the window. So it is an important thing. How can we remedy this? Is there a way that we can do this? What suggestions do you have?
Well, trust is fostered when a democracy places robust limits on power and channels conflict and distrust into public forms of deliberation. I think an immediate action that we could take would be to limit the use of urgency. No government should be able to accord urgency to a matter just because it wants to. It should actually be a matter that is pressing and urgent. And so one way we could do that is to require that a supermajority agrees that a matter is urgent before it is accorded urgency.
So that way you have to get, I guess, cross-party, cross-house support for something to be declared urgent. So it's not just, I want to pass this law really quickly. It's urgent.
Yeah.
But it's more like, this affects everyone.
Yeah, it would require more bipartisan participation, and it would ultimately mean that less bills are passed under urgency, which means the public can have that opportunity to submit to select committees. And so they can have their say.
Are there any other ways that we could increase trust or even participation?
Well, I think that really comes down to deciding that democracy matters and that we want to participate. And ultimately, the health of a democracy is improved by more democracy rather than less of it. And that means more participation. And so I would encourage Kiwis to, although it can sometimes seem hopeless, so they're not listening to me, to actually say, well, no, I'm going to participate, I'm going to press in, I am going to speak up on those matters that are important to me.
Wow, there's a lot to think about, a lot to work through in this. Stephanie, you've given us some great food for thought. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Trust in New Zealand has fallen sharply from its glory days. From elected officials to political institutions, there has been a decline in trust in democracies the world over. However, after years of defying this global trend, the Acumen Edelman Trust Barometer reported that New Zealand's political trust score now sits below the global average, a topic explored in a recent discussion paper by Maxim Institute. With dozens of global issues making headlines, it's not obvious why declining trust should grab our attention. However, trust is crucial to a thriving society. It contributes to social cohesion, facilitates cooperation, and makes us feel safe and a part of something bigger than ourselves. Trust is especially crucial for a democracy. As with any political system, too much distrust can spell disaster. The tricky thing is that distrust is a permanent feature of democracy. This is because democracy is a form of collective self-rule, where political equals make decisions together. Making decisions together isn't easy. Our interests and goals conflict, and where there is conflict, there is distrust. The data paints a concerning picture of the trust deficit in New Zealand. A parliamentary survey published in 2023 found that public engagement with Parliament had hit a new low of 13%. The survey also found that only 36% believed that Parliament dealt with issues of importance to them. Additionally, only 43% believed that the views of everyday New Zealanders were represented in Parliament. In summary, fewer Kiwis believe they have a meaningful say in the legislation that affects them, a trend that should be a cause for concern for us all. Democracy can survive distrust of political leaders and competing agendas as long as it can maintain what philosopher Mark Warren calls second-order trust. Second-order trust has two parts. First, citizens must trust that they will not lose everything if the majority overrules them. Their fundamental interests will remain secure. Second, citizens must trust that the government functions democratically. This means that power is effectively limited and decisions reflect the will of the people. In other words, people must trust that they have a say in the decisions that affect their lives. What's behind our loss of trust? There's no single cause. But events like the Three Waters proposal, parts of the pandemic response, and the use of urgency to pass legislation have contributed to the erosion of public trust. The good news is something can be done. To rebuild trust, pressure can be put on our MPs to support limiting the use of urgency. Urgency blocks an important avenue for public input into legislation. The public should only be denied this in the most pressing of circumstances. Additionally, if you can't find an MP who represents your views, find another party, or maybe even consider running yourself. Whatever you do, don't disengage from political participation. Without it, we don't have a democracy. At the end of the day, declining trust matters. How we respond to it matters more.
Thanks for listening to the Maxim Institute podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us and keep up with the rest of our research and analysis of politics and policy in New Zealand, you can sign up on the homepage of our website to get our monthly forum email and invitations to future Maxim Institute events. You can search and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. From the team at Maxim, mā te wā, goodbye for now.